This is the resistance. You are not alone. This is the resistance. You are not alone. This is the resistance.
Now, you don't know it yet, but you are listening to History in the Making while you are listening to this show.
We know now that in the early years of the 20th century, this world was being watched closely by intelligences greater than man, yet as mortal as his own.
I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, "I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!"
Censored by the mainstream media, the destroyer of fake news, and your host of The Rundown Live, Kristan T. Harris.
Welcome to another edition of the Rundown Live, rundownlive.com. I'm your host, Kristan T. Harris. We're live with Don By Jr., our co-host from the Free Thought Project. Thank you for joining us today for another broadcast. You guys can help out by checking out kgradb.com, as well as checking out band.video, where we catalog our videos as well as support them. The live audio streams can be found, and if you're not sure where to find us, how to share us, go to therundownlive.com. There's information to feed your brain right on the website. And as we know, today is a big day. It's a big day all around, and we're going to be diving into January 6th. What happened that day? What was it like to be on the ground? Like, I was there. I experienced a lot of craziness that had happened, as well as just prior. I think I was at a bunch of different protests, including what happened in December in D.C. with stabbings by Antifa of Proud Boys, as well as what else did we see? We saw August 23rd, 24th, 25th, the whole Kenosha unrest, the burning down the 3rd precinct. That year was crazy, Don, and we were there to capture the video. And right now we have one of the top videos on band.video, and it's just basically video footage that I captured on what happened on Capitol Hill. So today is the trial day. People are getting their popcorn ready. People are ready to do political battle, as we talk to our producer today. And, everyone has a different opinion on what is going on. And we want to hear from you guys. We want to know your opinion on what happened. Some people who are aware, they're like, you guys are going to only give a conservative viewpoint. So you guys are only going to give, a leftist viewpoint or whatever. People have their opinions on things. But when we talk about court, it has to deal with facts. It has to deal with facts, and then there's a jury that will decide what happens. Now, we're going to talk about some of the things that led up to January 6th. Essentially, 100% evidence that there was at least a plan to honeypot it and weaponize the feds. That can be proven because on December 31st, New Year's Eve, we captured an Airtable website which said, film these individuals, and they had 250 people on the list by Antifa, which were the same people that ended up on the FBI hit list. Is that coincidence? I doubt it. Now, how do we prove it that they were the ones that submitted it, filmed it? Well, I guess maybe we should file a FOIA to find out who submitted the evidence, if that's a possibility, to get that information, because they were giving out cash rewards. And basically we saw leftists militarize the feds against conservatives, because let's be honest, the United States was torn. You had Antifa and you had Proud Boys doing Gangs of New York style battle in downtown DC, going through alleys chanting thousands of Proud Boys. And I'm sure that caught the attention of the FBI. It got the attention of these top national security agencies. And how are you going to prevent this from happening? Well, you set up a honeypot, and I'm sure the left would be 100% down on it, because they were starting to already like identify these individuals that were Proud Boys of who they wanted to film on January 6th. And people had tag-alongs. And you know what they did? They filmed people and they turned in that video and people got trespassing tickets and got arrested. And then they hounded the FBI to go after individuals. We had one person who called into this program multiple times saying that people reported him over and over and over again. And the law enforcement said, well, he didn't do anything wrong. And now finally he received the ticket. We'll see. We'll see what happens. We're going to open the lines today. If you guys want to call in, phone number 1-855-472-5483. We'll have the lines open all show. We'd love to hear from you today. We're going to have some guests throughout the day that were at January 6th, above and beyond myself as a reporter, and we're going to dive into things.
Yeah, I definitely think today's going to be at least tonight's committee hearing. It's going to be interesting. I was reading this article from Al Jazeera News earlier because I tend to, in addition to U.S. news, I also like to curate a lot of international news because they tend to have a more objective perspective than the nonsense we have here with our corporate media. And one thing that the Al Jazeera article pointed out that I definitely agree with is that tonight's committee hearing has to be the swaying point. Like it's something that the article pointed out like 2 or 3 times, is that tonight's hearing has to grab the public's attention. Otherwise, the whole thing will fizzle out, because that's what they want. The feds, they want this to be the next big thing to blow it up. Of course, they didn't televise the Ghislaine Maxwell trial. They got everybody obsessed over that bullshit with Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. But this is the big political thing that they need to blow into the next big deal, obviously for money and power grabs and all the other nonsense the government always does. And tonight is the focal point of whether or not they're able to inflate it to be what they want it to be, or if it'll just fizzle out of public opinion.
It's prime time. It's prime time. Like there's no way about it. People are grabbed by this. Andrew Mercado Media. He's like the leftist version of the Rundown Live, and former vet, great guy. Enjoy his work. He's excited. He's like, I'm doing a live stream. I'm doing a stream at 8:00. He's going to have his popcorn ready and he's going to be talking about it. There's a lot of people that believe different things about January 6th. Some people believe it was for sure a planned event where people were planning to take over the Capitol building. Some people believe it happened organically, meaning that because of the mass people going in, this happened naturally. And that was the big question immediately going out of the gates. When all these mainstream media outlets contacted me from being there, including the Washington Post and others, the first thing they asked me is, did I have any idea of this was natural, organic? Did this protest and march on the Capitol Hill and the attack on the building happen naturally? Or is it something that was planned from the get-go? And as we know, there are people saying, zip ties and all these other things, which we found out later on, evidence that those came from law enforcement who dropped them on the ground, who are obviously at battle at the front gates on January 6th. And as we're going to air some of this footage here that in the background of my coverage of January 6th, so people can kind of see what was going on as we talk about this. But there's people out there that believe that a good, American citizens, right, activists and extremists, descended upon the Capitol and they planned this out. I believe that it was more personally, as a person who was there, it was opportunists. People were there to take an opportunity. And not only that, we found out that there were a bunch of FBI agents. We're not quite sure how many, but there were definitely FBI agents on the ground. And who's to say that they didn't encourage some of this, including like what we've talked about when we interviewed the guy from the Whitmer trial, literally the person who handled the Whitmer trial, which is in the news that the FBI literally hatched and plotted the kidnapping of Whitmer. And they literally got let go. We had him on our show a couple of weeks ago, maybe about a month or so ago. But we now know that those are the same people handling this trial. So it makes you wonder if this was all a honeypot from the get-go. They still don't have the person who dropped the pipe bombs on the night before. And the reason why the pipe bomb is so important because that is the dagger for the prosecution, right? I think if they find the person with the pipe bomb and they can find out who they are, what they do, and if it was intentionally dropped there as a justification for them to barricade themselves inside the building, which at that point, plenty times in history, Black Lives Matter, Code Pink, they go and occupy sessions and they push votes back by days, sometimes weeks, and they interrupt the sessions, and they're allowed to. But at this day, the issue is that they barricaded themselves in, and there were opportunists inside the building that obviously took advantage of an opportunity to enter the Capitol building. And at one point, where there's video and pictures of people standing in between ropes, and that really didn't look like an insurrection. But once Ashley Babbitt was shot, an unarmed female, which is definitely not justified ever, especially if you're thinking of, if you're literally an ACAB leftist. You definitely would be, deep throating the boot if you thought it was okay that Ashley Babbitt got shot, because now we've seen, because of video that has come out, that it wasn't justified, amongst other things. There's just so many things that played in the factor. And the video you guys are watching is my video footage of after Ashley Babbitt was shot, and people were enraged. Remember, they were programmed for a year entire that if law enforcement kills an unarmed person, guess what? It's okay to burn buildings down. But it's not. It's not. Let's be honest. It's never okay to burn property because it really doesn't solve the issue.
Right. You see, my thing is, like, in my opinion, and it's just from my observations and the things that I've covered, there are a lot of things going on here on this particular day. And it's a very complex operation. It's why I pretty much stayed silent when you and Bill were going back and forth just before we went on air. Because I'm more so in the middle between both of those opinions. Yes, the gathering itself seems to be organic, but there is that we know of something else was going on behind the scenes. And of course, to your point, there were honeypots, there were stuff going on with the feds. There was also a legitimate attempt to undermine the election. That's the point that I've raised since the very beginning, is that we have both the left and the right sort of battling for this control. Because as I've said for many years, 2016, 2020, 2008, 2004, all of our elections are completely fraudulent. You can look that up. I mean, everybody knows that there are elections, and our presidents in general are just puppets for, a greater, New World Order, globalist, deep state, whatever you want to say. But with this particular event, it seems, especially when you look at the Eastman memos and whatnot, it was certainly the protest itself. Not saying that the riot and all the crazy violent crap was like a pre-planned distraction, but the protest itself was definitely being capitalized upon by certain actors on the right. And I hate using these terms left and right. Everybody knows this, but for lack of a better term, capitalized upon by the right for, what do you mean doubted?
No, I said undoubtedly.
Oh, okay. My audio cut out. It sounded like you said doubt it, but yeah, it's definitely capitalized upon by certain actors on the right for their political gain, just like it was also capitalized upon certain actors on the left, Antifa, weaponized by the feds for their political gain. It's like people get caught up in these echo chambers, and we're seeing a lot of that, especially within the mainstream. Mainstream loves to push these echo chambers of it's either a right plot to overthrow democracy and this insurrection, or it was this totally Antifa orchestrated false flag. Yeah, exactly. And especially with circumstances like this, it's always more so. It's not a black and white situation. There's a big gray zone, and more often than not, more of the truth and more of what actually happened is found within that gray zone, because there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of multiple facets that are ongoing. And that when these echo chambers are perpetuated by the mainstream, people don't like to look at. They get caught up in their own tunnel vision.
Well, and so I agree with you from the get-go. There was multiple operations going on, and it wasn't just one thing. Let's keep in mind, Donald Trump at this point was doing whatever he could in order to overturn the election, because he believed at that point that there is no way sleepy Joe Biden could have won the election. Like majority of people that probably are out there, they did it. They woke up surprised at the end of the night. They went to bed looked like Trump won, and then in the morning they found out Biden was the winner. And there was a lot of controversy, especially around this election, especially around ballot stuffing. And was there fraud? Absolutely. Was there attempts? Is there fraud from the right? Probably. Like I mentioned that 2000. Okay, so I made a post. I said 2,000 mules. I wonder how many the conservatives had. And my buddy Barry Cooper said not enough, because they didn't win the election. And that's, I mean, that's essentially the truth. The right does fraud. The right attempts to do its politics. Listen, just because you're a conservative doesn't mean Donald Trump is all holy and wouldn't try, crazy stuff. I mean, let's not forget, that this president was the one that said we're going to grab him by the vagina. He's obviously,
well, not only that, I mean, people love to play semantics with that sort of stuff, with his language, with his abrasiveness and whatnot. I mean, it really, the Trump presidency has to be looked at more so from because, the right loves to say, oh, you guys are so obsessed about mean tweets. And I've always retorted with, no, I don't give a damn about his mean tweets or his abrasive language. I care about the fact that as much crap as he talked about lockdowns, he did nothing to stop it. I care about the fact that as much crap as he talked about masks, he did nothing to stop it. I care about the fact that as much as he talked about being anti-war, he exacerbated all of our conflicts. Oh, he didn't get us into any more wars, but he exacerbated and made worse all of our existing conflicts, specifically on behalf of the military-industrial complex. I care about the fact that despite praising Julian Assange, and I love the WikiLeaks, he sold him out, and it was Trump's CIA that plotted to kidnap, rendition, and assassinate Julian Assange in the middle of downtown London, with a shootout in the middle of downtown London. There are so many things about the Trump administration that prove that this guy is nothing more than a deep state puppet. He was a plant from the very get-go to make people believe, yes, this is the guy, the outsider, the nationalist to take back our republic. Nonsense. Total nonsense. And it's evidenced by his conduct, regardless of, say, he said, oh, I'm against this and that, but he did nothing to stop it. And so either, and of course he has his own, like, I'm not saying he was a total like George Bush, right? I'm not saying he was totally controlled by the deep state. He did have his own intentions, his own machinations. There are things that Trump did that I completely agree with. Helping make peace with North Korea, great. Getting us out of the TTP, great. There are a number of other things that I do agree with. But overall, despite the fact that he has his own individual intentions, he was either easily played as a puppet, partially decided to be, okay, yeah, I'll do it because he's surrounded. I mean, he's a smart guy. Everybody knows, like, the leftists love to say, oh, Trump's dumb. No, he's a very smart man. And he allowed himself to be surrounded by these deep state swamp things and do their bidding. I mean, just look at the strike on Syria, for example. Perfect example. But I'm ranting here. I don't need to get off on a tangent, but like, people need to consider these things.
Undoubtedly. And something that was going on at this time also that Trump actually used as a form of way of rallying people was the QAnon movement, which, let's be honest, a lot of these people who are trying to storm the Capitol building here, they believed like a lot of the nonsense that was going on in the Q forums, which, keep in mind, a foundation of misinformation can be founded on truth, meaning they'll give you some truth. Yes, Jeffrey Epstein is real. Yes, there was, documents about the Podesta and pizza, and which became Pizzagate, which was redirected by the media about a pizzeria. In reality, it had to do with Podesta leaks. There was that information, which was factual, but then they mounted that amongst a lot of other things, what was misinformation. And a lot of these people believed that there was evil pedophiles in government literally working to harm children. So they genuinely felt they were there for a good reason, and they took an opportunity to do what they felt was basically where we go one, we go all. It's almost like the programming.
Yeah, it is. It's very much
like the programming was set up just for this event.
Yes, it's very much programming. And when you look at a number of these individuals and how it's connected to QAnon, like, that's another thing that's not really touched on much. I mean, you have Jake Angeli. I guess that's an alias because I've seen his name be something else now in new articles. But the shaman, I hate calling him the QAnon Viking because, of course, I'm a Norse pagan. So let's not use the word Viking. But this dude here, this horn wearing dumbass, very much a QAnon guy, very much an agent provocateur. We know that because he used to be an agent provocateur for BLM and then he switched sides. We have other agent provocateurs. There was a great investigation by the Gray Zone. The name of the guy escapes me. But we have evidence of other agent provocateurs on site. We have evidence, 100% proven fact, of Army psyops on January 6th that were there. She was Army psyops. I don't know if she was an officer or an NCO, but she led a U.S. Army psyops division, brigade. I don't know which word to use, but she led one of those. She retired, just so happened to have just retired, and was leading one of the biggest crowds there at January 6th. There's a lot of messaging. There's a lot of psyop type material, like we were saying with QAnon and limited hangouts. That's why I always warn people about limited hangouts, because it seems as though nowadays, with the amount of study that I've done with covert operations, particularly in the nature of psychology, that we're seeing more and more limited hangouts within the past few years than we ever have before, because I think the intelligence community is realizing to manipulate the public domestically, that is the best way to do it. Because as I've explained, and as you just reiterated, the best way to manipulate someone with a psychological operation is with a limited hangout where you sprinkle a little bit of truthful information on a bunch of deceptive nonsense to completely redirect where the attention goes. So with the QAnon thing, it's like, oh yes, there are pedophiles in government. We know this. There are Satan worshipers in government. We know this. There are, trafficking in Jeffrey Epstein. We know this. There's cabal, deep state. We know this. So they put a lot of this legitimate information there, but then they twist it and say, but Trump is the guy, and just do nothing. Just be asleep. Trust the plan, because we're fighting the deep state. There's going to be 100,000 indictments, and everybody in the lockdowns are really safe. Like, you remember that?
Yes.
The lockdowns
time.
But like they said, remember, they said the lockdowns, and the reason why Trump was allowing the lockdowns was because the special forces were going in undercover while everything was locked down and rescuing all the children. Bull shit. Nonsense, ludicrous, stupid.
But people bought it. They like play the game.
My point. It's exactly my point. They bought it because you can sell it.
Right. And so what they did is they used occult symbolism, and they tried to use numbers and, tweets and everything else. And they tried to literally distort it in order to gain attention. And it led to a psyop at some point where a bunch of people took the opportunity to rush into the Capitol and do some really dumb things. Obviously, what was all stolen? Somebody stole a podium. Somebody stole Nancy Pelosi's laptop. Did they ever get that back?
I don't know. I wonder if they stole Nancy Pelosi's liquor. Bust open the liquor cabinet.
They're sitting there, like, they put their feet up on the desk. That's awful. Those horrible people. People, let's be honest, there were people that were charged that should not have been charged, and were heavy-handedly charged. And then there's people that still have not been caught, like the person who dropped the pipe bombs, which is wild. And
I think that's a huge crux of this. I mentioned before we went on the show. How much do we really think? How, in your opinion, actually, how much do you think that they're actually going to focus tonight's hearing on talking about the pipe bomber? Because it seems like they haven't really put a lot of effort into finding this person, and it's really the pipe bombs that is the reason why this whole thing kicked off. Because if not for the pipe bombs, they would not have barricaded themselves inside. That kicked off the whole thing. And it's really the focal point of this entire event. And yet it seems as though they're not putting much energy and effort into locating arguably the greatest threat from that day, because a bomb is a big, big problem. No one else had guns that we know of. No one else had knives or none of the other crap. But a bomb is a big, big problem, and they're not focusing on it.
Well, that's because they didn't catch the person. And I'm kind of curious if that's because it was used as a ploy that if they needed to evacuate, they already had people on high alert. because of that situation, they then went and felt like they needed to barricade themselves in instead of just allowing them to occupy the session. So I guess that's the what if game. We don't know what would have happened if they would have just allowed everyone to come in. Like, I don't know. I don't think that at the initial attempt that they would have actually caused any violence. They would have occupied, chanted, and they would have screamed, and maybe everyone would have eventually left as they would have postponed the vote, and then they would have went ahead and had it a different day. But no, they were not going to take the bullying by Donald Trump, and they were going to refuse to shut down. They were going to barricade themselves in, and then once people started banging on the doors, they evacuated the session and literally shot Ashley, an unarmed female, which they had really no threat or reason to feel threatened by her being there. Like,
because she was behind the barricades and they shot her through a pane of glass and through a door. She was unarmed. She posed absolutely no threat. It's absolutely repugnant that had occurred.
Well, then that's what's inspired the major reaction. Now, there's other people there I've spoken to, which have helped me kind of put together a full picture. BG on the scene, who spent a couple of days at my crib while he was here covering the Rittenhouse trial. Great kid, independent, not really affiliated with any political ideology. He just likes to go out and film history, and that's what he does. And he told me when he was in there, people were already trying to enter in buildings. Now, when you have that many people there are going to be bad actors. And like we mentioned, the whole psychosis, the mental psychosis, the mass hypnosis leading up to this, where people who are a mixture of Proud Boys and Boogaloos and QAnoners, and then there were people that were just there because they believed Donald Trump was God's savior for the United States. And there was church people singing, and it was like two completely different protests going on at the same time. And in majority, it seemed like this violence came in majority as a result to Ashley Babbitt's shooting, but there already was some craziness going on with people trying to enter in rooms because there was so many people. Things got a little chaotic. And
not only that, like, people also have to recognize the psychological effect of, this was in 2021. Throughout all of 2020, we had essentially the harshest lockdowns throughout the country. When you have a society that is forcibly unemployed, forcibly locked down and isolated, when you have that sort of a jarring shock to much of a country's psyche, it is going to have a psychological effect on the population. It causes stress, it causes anxiety, it causes pent-up energy, pent-up anger even. And we even saw that during the BLM riots. When you have a society locked down, stressed out, unemployed, anxiety, fear-ridden for that long, it's a combustible environment. We saw that with the riots, and we also saw that, in my opinion, with January 6th.
Well, not only that, like, keep in mind, because of the lockdowns, there's a lot of people that had a post-apocalyptic viewpoint of the world when this was going on. They thought the world was going to shit, and they felt like it was just a matter of days or months before we saw what was going on in Australia, what we saw that was going on in Canada happen here. All right. And there is a little truth to be said about that, but I wanted to give an idea of the overall history of this for people that weren't there. There was a weird energy in the air. It wasn't normal. It wasn't similar in many ways to the BLM and the Kenosha, a very different type of protest, because conservatives obviously protest differently, because as soon as things got a little intense, everyone backed down and left. As we're in BLM, they regroup and they push forward. They tend to reorganize and continue the protest until the point is made. And I didn't see that type of organization here. I didn't see any organized groups, really. But that doesn't mean that there weren't any. That doesn't mean that it wasn't captured. That's why we were having the trial. And I think this trial, first of all, no one was charged with insurrection. Everyone needs to know that because that's the biggest term used by the mainstream media. And I'm not quite sure what we're going to expect, but we have commercial break. If you guys want to call in, we want to hear your viewpoint. If you were watching a live stream or you were there on January 6th, give us a call. The phone lines are open. 85 KGRA Live, 472-5483. Was the Trump administration complicit in attempting to take over the Capitol building by violence? I don't know. I want to hear from you guys. Give us a call. We'll be back after these messages from our sponsors.
Hey members, the new KGRA DB app is now available on iOS and Android devices. Gain on-demand access to any KGRA DB programming. Download any show directly to your mobile device to listen or watch on the go. Go to the App Store and search KGRA DB.
Scrolling all day, time can disappear. Wanna make it count? Why not volunteer?
Posting pics of your food, that takes up time. Time, you've got time to binge all of season 9, though it got so bad.
Time, you got time. We're gonna grow back and be the same browse you had.
Just a few hours to keep families from harm. Help us end home fires with Sound the Alarm.
Volunteer for a day to install free smoke alarms in your community.
Discover the Observation Deck, a one-of-a-kind virtual event platform that takes video conferencing to the next level by using avatars to navigate a campus. There's so many areas and activities to choose from. There's a 1,000-seat auditorium, an expo hall, a nightclub, and even a beach. So come attend a conference, take a class, or hear a lecture on the incredible Observation Deck campus. Go to theobservationdk.com.
You're listening to the KGRA Digital Broadcasting Network. We provide unparalleled coverage of trending news in the world of ufology, cryptozoology, and paranormal phenomenon. Whether you're watching our video live stream or listening to one of our audio programs, you are getting the best from world-renowned researchers and hosts, guiding you through topics the mainstream won't touch. Miss one of your favorite programs? No problem. Head over to the members area at kgradb.com for access to our massive library of award-winning content. Make contact, stay connected, only at kgradb.com.
Rundown Live, rundownlive.com. I'm your host, Kriston T. Harris, and we're here live with Don By Jr. on KGRADB.com, as well as Band.video, Rumble, Rockfin, anywhere where video is found. And you can find the audio feed. There's no better place than KGRADB to check us out, to find our catalog. I want to give a shout out to all the people over there that I got to hang out with over the last week. Bill, who does a wonderful job as producer, and Chanel as well. I got to meet Warren, the station owner, amongst other things. But today we're talking about January 6th, as tonight is the night of the hearing that many, especially people on the left, are excited to watch. And I'm kind of concerned because there's a lot of mainstream media misinformation out there, as well as, I'm not going to lie, there's propaganda from the right. And there's a lot of conspiracy culture that is maybe misdiagnosing, misunderstanding, and they believe the whole thing was a psyop. Now, we're kind of meeting in the cesspool in between, that there was a whole bunch of different operations going on. We had the Airtable account, which identified Proud Boys and told Antifa people to go out and record those individuals, who obviously turned it into the FBI. And also, check that out, right? They literally had a majority of the people in the FBI wanted list were people filmed by what I would deem leftists who basically went to go film and weaponize the feds. All right. And then that's why they feel like they have an FBI issue. That's why you haven't heard much from Antifa, because they realized after January 6th that there's an FBI issue. The idea was used to weaponize the feds. That's essentially what they did. And after December, after you had 4,000 Proud Boys chanting and going like gangs of New York and battling Antifa on the street, I'm sure that NSA and Homeland Security and FBI were like, we can't have this. We can't have this kind of thing going on. And, January 6th was the perfect honeypot. The ideologies of people who are there who adopted the where we go one, we go all, the whole QAnon, 500,000 indictments, bracelets, and, people are being laid over in Australia because Tom Hanks is being persecuted while children are being saved in dungeons and all this other stuff. They literally believed it. And I can't hold that against anyone. If you truly believe children were being molested by politicians, and let's be honest, there are pedophile politicians, there are Satanists who are politicians. We've had Eric Freeman on the show when they unveiled the Baphomet statue. There are politicians there. I'm just saying that there are people with these ideologies, including bankers and everything else, but that doesn't mean that's everybody. And not only that, the question is did Donald Trump, was this premeditated, or did it happen organically and bad actors took advantage of it and they were inspired to because of the situation by the feds, by undercover actors on the left, by people who are just mentally misguided and programmed by all this puzzle gaming and a bread maker is going to take the crumbs and bake you a cake, and then inside there's a file, and that file tells us what Q means. And the president's wearing Q dresses, not the president, his wife is wearing Q dresses, and they're signaling to all their Q followers. Is that really enough to provide information that the Trump administration literally planned and concocted a violent takeover of the Capitol building? Or was this something that happened organically? We want to take your phone call.
So,
1-855-472-5483 is the phone number here. If you want to call in, feel free. If you were there, watch the live stream, or you want to give your thoughts, we have open lines. I'll show. And I didn't mean to cut you off there, Don. I apologize.
It's okay. No, I actually mistakenly cut you off. I forgot we were plugging the phone number at first, so my bad. But what I was saying is, again, it's kind of where I stand is that, of course, we know that the Trump administration was up to something simply because of how hard they pushed Mike Pence to try to not certify the votes and whatnot. So we know for a fact that was happening. The question is, and of course, the whole purpose of this hearing is whether or not the Trump administration deliberately facilitated an attempted violent takeover. And I don't think that was the case. What I think was the case was that the Trump administration, or actors within it, assets within it, did help facilitate the big protest, just a protest, not intention for it to be violent, but just the protest. So everybody's distracted about this. Holy crap, there's thousands of people outside the Capitol. And then the thing on the inside and the certifications and the switching and whatnot can go on. But it wasn't intended to be a violent thing, but it was intended to be there as a big distraction. That's why the gates were open. It's why they allowed them inside. It's why, despite the fact, and we know this now because of the Capitol Police Chief testified to this, and we also have members of the National Guard that have testified to this, there were distress calls sent out at least 3 times during this entire ordeal, and they were denied. It's because they needed this, and this is my opinion based on my analysis, they needed this to be a distraction for the whatever the Trump administration was doing to attempt to maintain its seat of power, and then was capitalized upon by Antifa, capitalized upon by whomever they had on the right. All, as I said, the moving facets take it over, turn it into this huge violent thing, and as operations like this can do, gets way out of control. Or maybe it was, the not out of control in the sense that no one planned it to be violent, but the bad actors that took over, the Antifa, the whomever on the right, decided let's descend it into chaos. Because as I said, there's probably multiple operations going on. But like you said, so we have knowledge that things were going on the left, the honeypot, the weaponization of the feds, also Trump trying to do what he did. And the thing is, it's not to say that Biden didn't steal the election. I think anyone who looks at it can recognize that Biden is not a legitimate president. And of course, as I said previously, I've contended that no presidents are legitimate presidents, including Donald Trump, when you just look at what happened in 2016 with the way they completely rigged the primaries. It delegitimizes the entire electoral process. But I don't need to get into that.
Well, not only that, Cambridge Analytica, Brittany Kaiser, somebody I know. There's a bunch of things that delegitimize that, and we do have somebody that is joining us here as well that was at the Capitol on January 6th. I want to welcome to the show Fake Mike, Real News, the man, the myth, the legend, the man who is confronted and went to Bill Gates's home and actually is doing something about the craziness in the world. Will Turbot is here joining us. Welcome to the show, Will Turbot from Fake Mike, Real News. He was there January 6th as well. And man, what's your take on what's going to happen today on January 6th, the big hearings of what is going on in DC right now?
Well, I was listening to you gentlemen before I hopped on, and I think most of your diagnosis is probably spot on. I would agree with you guys that I don't think that it's just it's either a complete psyop or it's something that was completely fabricated. I have my own thoughts on that myself, but I honestly don't know. You're saying that there's a lot, at least in my experience, you're saying that there's a lot of people on the left that are going to be interested in this. I haven't heard too many people talking about this. I don't know what type of attention it's going to get, quite frankly. But I think regardless of how much live attention it gets, I do think that the shows tomorrow will probably highlight that, put that in the cycle and see what they can get from that. I don't know how successful they will be with that, but it should be interesting. I'm surprised that they're still pushing this narrative this hard too, because I'm not a lefty or a righty or a statist for that matter. But I do think it's pretty interesting. I mean, like you're talking about with Trump and the lockdowns, the Capitol building should never, ever be closed. And if it is closed, then the people that are working in there shouldn't be working in there either, and they shouldn't be receiving taxes. When these people take an oath to protect our rights and then do the literal exact opposite, and we're still paying them, but we're not allowed inside, that's a problem. And of course, I denounce any type of violence, assault, theft, or damage, or anything like that. But the people should be able to get into their own building. And maybe this wouldn't happen if people were just allowed to freely come and go in their own building.
Well, and we were discussing that because the reason why we weren't allowed to freely come and go, at first they opened up the doors and allowed people in, was because allegedly pipe bombs were dropped the day before. And they used that as justification to lock it down. But what's interesting is Pelosi didn't call in extra security. Like she could have set up extra security the day before. You're telling me the FBI, which has unlimited access to algorithms, pre-crime, artificial intelligence, metadata on every person that was there. They said that they have that. They said that they knew who was going to be there, essentially. They can't figure out who dropped the pipe bomb in front of, the Republican and Democrat sectors of the Capitol building, which justified the behavior. It was almost like a honeypot, and in part, there are so many things that played into factor. And I guess the question is this something that happened organically and bad actors took advantage of, as well as there's multiple other psyops going on at the same time? Or do you think this was a Trump administration planned out thing with Oath Keepers and Proud Boys and everyone else? Or do you think that it was just an opportunity for them to take advantage of the situation?
It's very difficult to say because we've all seen the videos of people being let inside from multiple areas, multiple doors, people being let inside. We've seen people that have appeared to be one person or represented themselves a different way online before. You can chalk that up to whatever you want to. People do change their minds. That stuff does happen. But I think the overwhelming thing is something that you guys touched on is QAnon, right? Is because I was there. I was on the other side of the Capitol when you were taking this film here, and this is awesome stuff, man. I saw some crazy things happening that day. But I think the thing is, it kind of ties into I have a little theory here that come 2014, 2015. around the Obama presidency, people, whoever the deep state guys, whatever you want to call them, they're like, all right, you guys, you got us. All right, the brainwashing, we're gonna have to try something new, because they're like, all right, we had Bush, we had this system going for a long time and it worked. And then they thought, all right, we'll bring Obama in and it'll be cool because he's a black president and that'll smooth things over. And very quickly into Obama's presidency, we found out that he was a wolf in sheep's clothing. Some people knew it before it even happened. So I believe, this is just a theory, I can't substantiate this whatsoever, but I believe that the age of Trump, the age of Elon Musk, Alex Jones, Joe Rogan, these people kind of, not only is it a beautiful divide and conquer, order out of chaos, but also people are tired of the mainstream news. People are tired of politicians reading off teleprompters. So that's why things like Joe Rogan, Donald Trump kind of resonated with a lot of people. So you didn't even need to tell these people to go storm the Capitol. You could just say, hey, they stole the election, right? We're going to have this big protest. And almost invariably when you get, and whether it's the left or the right or whatever side, almost invariably when you get large groups of people together, even if it's just an infinitesimal fraction of those people, they're going to do stuff that the majority of the people don't want them to do. And I'm sure, regardless of if there is some direction to this, I do know for sure that some people there were just doing what they could because they felt emboldened because they were with a lot of people. So I couldn't tell you, but that's my little theory. So take that for what you will.
Yeah, I'd say exactly what you mean. You know, the essentially the mob mentality, you know, sort of takes over. And, you know, as I mentioned earlier, you know, the psychological factors, of course, we have multiple psyops going on at the same time, the QAnon nonsense. We also have the psychological factor of, you know, just coming off a year of lockdowns and unemployment and stress and all of that, you know, just causes people to lose it, or at least be a powder keg, to be more susceptible to losing it. And, you know, we definitely saw that, you know, take shape here, in addition to being capitalized upon by those who may have wanted it to descend into chaos.
Yeah, by the whole chaos aspect of things, when we actually got the call that, what was it, Breitbart was the first one that reported on this immediately as soon, because we were watching the live feed while we were pounding all these trolleys. And as soon as we heard that people started to move past the barricade, which was quickly dismantled, by the way. By the time we got there, there was no barricade. In fact, I was contacted by the feds asking for that video to be able to prove that the barricade was not there so that people would not be wrongfully charged, which, you know, I'm like, okay, I'm okay with that.
I'll jump in real quick here. I mean, that's part of the BS. Like, why do the feds need your help improving? There's cameras everywhere there. They have their own people there themselves, right? There's cameras everywhere outside of that building. They don't need Kriston T. Harris from the Rundown Live. Like, share, and subscribe. They don't need your footage. Why? And then it's so funny too because it's so funny too because, you know, driving back, you know, driving across this country, you know, leaving New York City, you see a big, huge digital sign. If you have any information regarding the terrorist attack that occurred on January 6th, I mean, it's like, that's your job. I just think it's remarkable that but it's also interesting too, because you do have some of the ties between some of these players, Enrique Tarrio and others, Joe Biggs, with the feds too. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean anything too. Now, just because you talked to a Fed at one time, the FBI called me before, you know what I'm saying? I didn't talk. They wanted me to come talk to him. I didn't come in to talk to him. But just because you talk to a Fed too doesn't mean that you're all of a sudden part of a bad. They just walk up to you or give you a call. Right. It doesn't necessarily mean you're a bad person. So I think you guys are doing a great job of kind of, you know, this could be a very black or white issue, and there's a lot of things at play. And I appreciate you guys bringing that up.
Yeah, absolutely. It's wild. It's wild. And the whole experience was unlike anything I've ever experienced before. And I think that what really emboldened people that when things got super chaotic was the shooting of Ashley Babbitt.
Yeah, well, you know, one thing that I haven't heard you guys talk about yet, maybe I missed it, But one of the things, I can even send you a link on this too, that I thought was very, very fascinating. It was a really, really weird day there too. You know, you and I, Kriston, we've been to a lot of events. It was a really weird day. People don't realize how cold it was that day too. It was mad cold that day. But what I found interesting is on the mainstream news reports of the charges from the people that were there afterwards, it came out. And I remember Jordan Maxwell telling me 20 years ago, hey, guess what? You know what? You're not under the United States Constitution. You're under Admiralty Maritime Law. And I was like, okay, maybe that's true. Maybe it's not true. But I keep an open, skeptical mind to everything. Anything I can't prove, I just throw it in the back of the noggin and we'll see what happens. So 20-something years later, I'm reading the charges of these people from the Providence Journal, which is the Rhode Island's version of New York Times. That's their newspaper of record. Oh, well, destruction or to property or buildings in special Admiralty Maritime Law. And I couldn't believe I'm reading this here because we're not in the ocean, right? None of these fools are admirals. So it's just like, wow, this is something that's really going on here. And I know that most of the BLM protesters who, you know, destroyed police stations, did all this stuff, they weren't charged with Admiralty law. So I just thought that was fascinating to actually see that come true. And unfortunately had to be with some people that we actually know too. So
well, right. And that's essentially it. Jordan Maxwell, a great individual who recently passed, would talk about this and how the banking system, a bank splits and divides rivers, which is currency, the current or currency. That's why we call it currency. And there's a bank that divides the currency. It's all maritime law. And, you know, we even go to court where they play games. You play games on the court, Jordan would always say. And, you know, he dive into the symbolism of the judge wearing black and Saturn and Saturnia worship and everything else. And yeah, the world we live in is very different than what we've been made to believe. And
what to wake up and do your homework.
Right. And that's what it really comes down to, is waking up and doing your homework. Will, I really appreciate you joining us here. Before we let you go here, because we're going to be coming across commercial break, I wanted to give you a chance not only to plug your stuff, but any last thoughts. What do you think that these hearings are going to reveal? Like you mentioned, I think that they're trying to figure out what's sticky. The whole insurrection narrative didn't stick prior, but I think that now that it's going to be televised, and ever since Rittenhouse was televised and Johnny Depp was televised, people are being conditioned to get ready for court TV. And guess what? It's on prime time. They moved it for prime time because they want to advertise what is going on with the January 6th Commission report, amongst everything else that's going to be told with this hearings. Who's all going to be on trial? Are we going to see some familiar faces like Enrique Tarrio and Biggs and everyone else? Or are we going to hear about, is it going to be a giant nothing burger like the Whitmer trial in Michigan?
Well, again, when I first learned about I was on a podcast at the time, and I got a breaking news report on my device here, my phone, and it said, looks like they've uncovered a plot to kidnap Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer. And I said right there, I was like, this might not age well, but I guarantee you that the FBI is involved with this. And sure enough, we find out that it was. And I do think that they are going to, it's a very interesting point that I had not even considered how we're being conditioned to put this in. And then plus prime time, I mean, that's pretty interesting. So I do think that, like I said earlier, I do think that they'll milk it for every last drop that they can get out of it. And I think the real difference here is not the ideologies between the left and the right. I think it's because it's one thing for protesters or rioters to go after the police, but this is the Capitol. These are the fancy pants. You can't go against those people. How dare you do this? And so I feel like they're kind of making this a bigger deal than it is, not only to kind of, you know, radicalize conspiracies. And I think that's part of the thing I was talking about earlier with this new media with the Rogan and the Trump and the Musk and all that. I think also the QAnon stuff, and you guys should check out Titus Frost on BitChute. That's what I'll plug there. He actually kind of exposes, with some pretty good evidence, I'm not willing to say for certain, who I believe QAnon is. And you can go check out his video. And there's a lot of overlap there with people like Michael Flynn, people like Roger Stone. And so it's very difficult to say, but I also would tend to agree if Trump is not part of the plan himself, he's a very willing puppet. But I do think that they'll milk this for everything that it's absolutely worth, because you're not allowed to go against politicians. And I'm very surprised that people got that close, honestly. And hopefully, and again, I'm all about nonviolence, and I do believe in self-defense, but hopefully that's a wake-up call for these people. You know what I'm saying? And hopefully next time something happens, we can be nonviolent about that. And maybe if the right wasn't so against the left, and that they could have came together and been peaceful. And imagine what would have that would have changed the world. And so that's what really needs to happen. But yeah, you guys can find me on Fake Mike Real News on all platforms, MIC. I'm almost back. They banned my first channel. I'm almost back to 15,000 subscribers. Help me get up there. Also find me on Auditing America, the bigger channel, hundreds of my own videos over there too. And yeah, I really appreciate you guys allowing me to speak. Kristan, you always do amazing work. And I guess the last thing I would like to say is please donate to Kristan T. Harris to help him get to these other places. Now, me and Kristan, man, I wish I could have seen him and we would have reunited at Bilderberg. So if you could just tell people the best place to donate, because I don't trust these fools. I don't trust anybody, Stone Cold Steve Austin, but I trust Kristan T. Harris a lot more than I trust everybody else. So guys, please give a donation to Kristan T. Harris right now and tell him good old Fake Mike sent you.
Hey, Will, how would you feel if I told you that the feds that handle the Whitmer case are the ones that are handling the January 6th commission, because that's the case?
It wouldn't surprise me whatsoever. It wouldn't surprise me whatsoever. It just, the connections are just unbelievable.
Yeah, everyone, the world's a stage.
Yep, the world is a stage. Everyone check out Fake Mike Real News. Will Turbot was there January 6th. I want to go cover Bohemian Grove. If you guys want to support me, you can donate. Go to therundownlive.com. There's a link, and then you can donate PayPal, Venmo, however you like, or pick up a shirt. We have great swag in the store, sexy shirt, all that. And Will, I got to send you one of the new hot shirts, man. I'll send it out.
I'm gonna buy one off you. Also, send me the dates for Bohemian Grove, because I'm gonna try to get my.
Let's do that. Let's get a bunch of us out together, and let's get there early so we can go to all the cool places and see who we can identify at the big cult out in the West Coast where they go do mock, child sacrifice, cremation of care, all that fun stuff. Bohemian Grove, where Nixon and Reagan and Clinton and Bush and all the Kissinger and all the cool cats hang out in the urinate in the woods and dress and drag and, do the jinx and all that other fun stuff that they like to do over there. That being said, Will Turbot is our guest. Check him out, Fake Mike Real News. We are opening the phone lines. If you were on or there at January 6th, we want to hear from you. Even if you saw the live stream or you have an opinion, this is the footage of the Rundown Live at January 6th covering the event. We ran into Ford Fisher in the video. If you're following along, there he is passing me. Check it out. This is when law enforcement pushed us around and they retaliated to what was going on to try to clear when backup came. That being said, guys, we'll be back after these messages from our sponsors. Don't go anywhere. Give us a call, 1-855-472-5483 or 85 KGRA Live is the call number.
Hey members, the new KGRA DB app is now available on iOS and Android devices. Gain on-demand access to any KGRA DB programming. Download any show directly to your mobile device to listen or watch on the go. Go to the App Store and search KGRA DB.
Scrolling all day, time can disappear. Wanna make it count? Why not volunteer?
Posting pics of your food, that takes up time. Time, you've got time to binge all of season 9, though it got so bad.
Time, you got time. We're gonna grow back and be the same browse you had.
Just a few hours to keep families from harm. Help us end home fires with Sound the Alarm.
Volunteer for a day to install free smoke alarms in your community.
Discover the Observation Deck, a one-of-a-kind virtual event platform that takes video conferencing to the next level by using avatars to navigate a campus. There's so many areas and activities to choose from. There's a 1,000-seat auditorium, an expo hall, a nightclub, and even a beach. So come attend a conference, take a class, or hear a lecture on the incredible Observation Deck campus, go to theobservationdk.com.
You're listening to the KGRA Digital Broadcasting Network. We provide unparalleled coverage of trending news in the world of ufology, cryptozoology, and paranormal phenomenon. Whether you're watching our video live stream or listening to one of our audio programs, you are getting the best from world-renowned researchers and hosts, guiding you through topics the mainstream won't touch. Miss one of your favorite programs? No problem. Head over to the members area at kgradb.com for access to our massive library of award-winning content. Make contact, stay connected, only at kgradb.com.
Now, you don't know it yet, but you are listening to History in the Making while you are listening to this show.
We know now that in the early years of the 20th century, this world was being watched closely by intelligences greater than man, yet as mortal as his own.
I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, "I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!"
Censored by the mainstream media, the destroyer of fake news, and your host of the Rundown Live, Kriston T. Harris.
Rundown Live, rundownlive.com. I'm your host, Kriston T. Harris, live with Don By Jr., the Free Thought Project, and we've been kind of rehashing and going over the January 6th Brigade and all that happened. If you were there January 6th or you're watching a live stream or whatever it was, we want to get your take on what happened on January 6th, what you think this trial will take. And people have different viewpoints, so we'd love to hear from you guys today, whether you think people are going to be locked up and this will be full proof that Donald Trump was complicit and incited a riot, or maybe you just think that it was a psyop, or maybe it's all, like we've been talking, it's a collaboration of a cesspool of multiple different operations, multiple opportunists, adrenaline junkies, some bad decisions by Pelosi not getting additional security amongst, everything else. And like Will Turbot, who just joined us, said, should the Capitol building, if it's our taxpayer dollars paying for it, be ever closed down, especially during a rally? This was it, Save America rally, as they called it or dubbed it, in D.C. on January 6th. The phone number here, if you guys want to call in, we'll make it real simple for you. We'll put it on the screen. The phone number is 1-855-472-5483, and that's 1-855-472-5483. 5483. You can see that right up here. If you guys want to call in and give us your input on your experience on what happened on January 6th, what you think is going to happen with these hearings, let us know. But as you guys can see, we've been airing and playing video footage that we, the Rundown Live, captured while we were reporting from the front gates. And this is law enforcement pushing everyone back during the protests on January 16th, when they all came around. And I was assaulted by law enforcement multiple times, and I didn't hurt anyone or I didn't hit anyone. But I think that there were law enforcement that were probably scared for their lives. They were like, literally, there's so much misinformation that was coming out immediately after this. Like, we found out that nobody actually died as a result of no law enforcement died as a result of the protest. They died afterwards, right? Or they died because of health related issues. And in one scenario, the law enforcement officer was pulled behind police lines and didn't get the attention he needed by law enforcement, and that's why he died. But I'm not saying by any means this was a very peaceful event. As you guys can see on the screen, People were shoving, they were pushing, getting batoned, rubber bulleted in the face. There was press there. And, some people were just innocent bystanders, as were the people who were being violent. It seemed they were, they're what we see here. They were trying to push through. And this is something that differs from BLM protests. At BLM protests, you see people chanting, you see them throwing things at law enforcement. Do you see any frozen water bottles being thrown? Do you see any fireworks being shot at law enforcement? Do you see any cherry bombs going off behind the lines? I'm just comparing it. Like, there are two completely different types of protests. What you saw is the Trump supporters, they had no guns. They had no knives. They weren't throwing frozen water bottles. Like, yeah, they had flags. I think that was the argument. The flags are pointy on the bottom,
Right. And yeah, that is a very poignant point. There are two completely different sets of protests. Of course, me having to be Mr. Man in the middle, I do just, for the listeners that don't always tune in and haven't already heard me say this, it is also important to keep in mind that the BLM protests that we're talking about are the ones that were few and far between, that were propped up by the media as violent, when the overwhelming majority, again, and I will say and continue to contend, the overwhelming majority of BLM protests were in fact peaceful. It was the media who loved to prop up the ones that did get violent, which a handful of them were instigated by agent provocateurs. You can say they were feds, they can say they were Antifa, whomever. The media loves to prop that crap up, just like the media loves to prop this up and say, oh, it was a violent insurrection, it was a terrorist attack, is this, that, and the third, because the media, more than anything else, cares about two things: views, because they want to get money, and proliferating a divide and conquer narrative, because they are the servants of the deep state. And the only way the deep state survives is by keeping people divided against each other, left versus right, white versus black, Christian versus atheist, whomever, when the only real enemy are those who exploit and abuse innocent people. And who's that? Mostly our government. And governments anywhere, not just our government, but government in general is inherently authoritarian and abusive and exploitative, but particularly here in America, because we're talking about America.
Well, and here it is in the PBS.org, as you know, public broadcasting system. A year after January 6th, FBI still hunting for pipe bomber and other insurrection suspects. The suspect was covered from head to toe, skulking through the dark streets of the nation's capital before methodically placing explosives outside the offices of the Republican and Democrat National Committee. But one thing that they don't tell you is those explosives weren't dropped on January 6th. They were dropped on January 5th.
Mm-hmm.
And here it says only 17 hours later, and just before the U.S. Capitol was stormed by a sea of pro-Trump rioters, were the pipe bombs discovered. Oh, they discovered. You're telling me with the security that they have at the Capitol Hill, they discovered them 17 hours later.
And that's another thing that I wanted to bring up when Will was here, and I thought of it, and then immediately it left my mind because ADHD. I've been having a big ADHD fit over the past 48 hours. But another big thing is the lack of security, the lack of reinforced security leading up to January 6th, when we know, as you said, the pipe bombs were dropped on the 5th, and yet they weren't even discovered until 17 some odd hours later. But also the fact that the people is also not being talked about much in the mainstream media, in my opinion, because they want to divert attention away from this, is the fact, and I've covered this because I live in Virginia. I'm only an hour and some odd away from the Capitol. The absolute fact that we know of, that was reported upon by Virginia media and some national media, that the day before, January 5th, an FBI field office here in Virginia issued a threat warning, a warning of the possibility of violence at the Capitol the following day at the protest, and yet security was not increased. At the same time, the FBI in Washington, D.C. was investigating what they considered to be, in their own documents, a potential credible threat of a terror attack by Iran for the death of General Qasem Soleimani. So the fact that an FBI field office in Virginia issues a warning that there's potential political violence and that security should be increased, and an FBI field office in Washington, D.C. says, hey, we're monitoring a potential terrorist attack on the Capitol building at the same time, And yet, despite both of these, security was not increased in the slightest. To me, indicates that they knew something, but they wanted there to be lax security because they wanted things to be overwhelmed and they wanted a distraction. Did they want it to turn violent? Maybe. Who knows? But they definitely wanted a distraction, and making sure the security was subpar, in my opinion, plays into that.
Yeah, it's wild. Also showing information supporting what we were saying earlier, just so you guys understand. Defense tells jury FBI agents made up Whitmer kidnapping plot to build their careers. And these are the same people that will be running in aspect the campaign against the January 6th defendants. And, how credible, I mean, why would they do that? Why would they have the same feds behind, plans to kidnap Whitmer, which was a false flag. Also, going after January 6ers, unless they were literally trying to, I don't know, man. It's just so weird. It just
the world is a stage, and they have the most corrupt people do the most corrupt things. Of course, the feds orchestrated the Whitmer kidnapping. We know this. The FBI has a history of doing this. It didn't for the new viewers, or for the people who are just newly becoming aware or becoming woke or waking up, or however you want to phrase it. I don't know the terms these young kids use nowadays, but for those that are just now starting to learn about all the messed up stuff that our government does, do not think that the Whitmer situation was the first time that happened. The FBI has a history, and John Whitehead of the Rutherford Institute has actually done an amazing job documenting this, as has Glenn Greenwald. A very long history of setting up terror plots just so that they can then turn around and foil themselves and say, oh, we stopped this big thing from happening, when in reality it was them that set it up in the first place.
Right. And like we mentioned, we have open lines today, 1-855-472-5483. We now have those lines open. If you guys want to call in, we'd love to hear from you. Will you be watching the January 6th committee? It's getting primetime spotlight. And as we mentioned, they're going to advertise this. It's going to be on the cover of every news article, newspaper. It's going to be out there. It's going to be exploded. People are going to go ahead and be talking about this. I think that they are trying to sidetrack people. Like, first of all, it was COVID, and then it was lockdowns, and then it was BLM marches, then it was January 6th, and then it was we can go on and on and on and on. It was we can go towards what do we have recently? Monkeypox, and before that, like, it's the new thing. It's like literally people are going to be captivated by this. I think that at some point it will be interesting to see people's viewpoints and where it goes with this. So like we mentioned, if you guys want to call in, we do have the open lines for those listening on kgradb.com. 1-855-472-5483 is the phone number. Would love to hear from you. We could talk about it if you would like. It's interesting. It's wild. And I think that they're going to try to make this, something that was premeditated. They're going to try, instead of looking at the evidence and saying, this is what the story tells, they're going to tell the story and say, well, this is the evidence to support it.
Right. We see that happen a lot, especially with these overly politicized investigations. They don't allow the evidence to create the conclusion. They have the conclusion, and then they try to find the evidence to substantiate it. And, another big thing with this, and I think that needs to be mentioned quite often, and as I have been mentioning since the beginning of this, is that also the fact that the reason it's being politicized, or at least one of the reasons it's being so politicized and prime time, and because when's the last time you saw something like this at 8 p.m. at night? They usually hold these things like 10, 9, 8 o'clock in the morning, but they want to make sure they get as many eyes on as possible. And it's because the Biden administration, even before transition, even before election, many of these individuals, and as well as the deep state hawks that are still reside within it, we're talking about, we need this new war on domestic terror, and that's been a big thing that they've been trying to push from the very beginning is creating the narrative of the new war on terror, and it's a domestic war on terror. We got to fight domestic terror. We got to fight this domestic white supremacist terror threats and all this. So they're propping these stories up. They want to manufacture this narrative of a war on domestic terror, and January 6th provided them the perfect opportunity to do that. Now, was that the intention? Like, was it a plan? Oh yeah, we're going to make this January 6th thing happen, and that's perfect for our agenda. Or was it just capitalized upon? Maybe a little bit of both. Who knows? But they're definitely capitalizing upon it now to push that narrative, and we're seeing. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, man. I'm with you 100%. They're going to definitely capitalize on it, and they want to make sure Donald Trump will never run again. But I don't think that's going to be the case. I think he's going to run, and I think he's going to use all of these different facets in order to divide. I mean, this country is already divided, but imagine Donald Trump versus Hillary Clinton in 2024. Like, what would you think? Like, that's where I think we're going. Like Hillary Clinton's already talking about running for president again. Like, if we had to go through that all over again, Hillary for president, Donald Trump, like, people need to stop believing that leaders can lead them. Like, like, nobody voted who would lead us.
That's the big thing. That's the big message that really needs to be gleaned from all of this is be your own leader. These people are not here to serve you or me or Kristan or any of us. They are leeches. They are parasites. They are sociopathic opportunists who only care about their own money and power and authority in general. This idea, whether it's in America, the UK, Australia, Zimbabwe, wherever, this idea of authority, this archaic concept that certain people have the right to rule over others is ridiculous. And now I'm getting into my anarchist philosophy and the fact that I'm a voluntarist and whatnot. You, as a human, are inherently free, and no one has the right to rule over your life so long as you're being, peaceful and not infringing on others' right to exist. Just go read Larkin Rose's book. I think it's called The Greatest Superstition or The Most Dangerous Superstition or something like that. Where essentially he debunks, is the best argument in my opinion, to debunk this idea of authority. It doesn't exist. Authority is not a real thing. The only legitimate authority is when it's derived from consent. When it's not derived from consent, it's authoritarianism. And who have you really, think about it, consented to rule over and control every aspect of your life? You might say, oh, I voted for such and such person, but why? Just because these ideas have been implanted and indoctrinated into our society, into our culture, to think that this is the only way that a society and a culture can live. And we've seen it for thousands and thousands of years, whether it be a democracy, a republic, a dictatorship, a monarchy, whatever you call it. And it all results in the same thing: oppressive statist violence. Some systems, yes, are not as bad as others. Of course, a democracy, better than a dictatorship. But at the same time, it's like saying, oh, this system of authoritarianism is just a little bit better and a little less oppressive than these other systems of authoritarianism. It's like choosing the lesser of two evils. It's still evil. And, again, I'm getting into this rant about anarchism and the belief in authority and all that stuff, so we can segue from that. But it's just, I wanted to plug that there. Be your own leader. Be your own hero. You control your life. No one has the inherent right to rule you.
Well, here it is. AP, probably the most middle of the line mainstream media, has misinformation within the first sentence, and they call it an insurrection. No one was charged with insurrection, so is it even fair to call it an insurrection? Isn't that immediately misinformation? But it's allowed. It's allowed. Why is it allowed? Because they want you to think of it and they want to control your mind in a certain way. It's words. How do words program you? We've been programmed from the day it happened to believe that it was a crazy, violent insurrection. And it was violent. But was it comparable to people throwing industrial grade fireworks, cherry bombs, frozen water bottles, all sorts of crazy stuff in Kenosha or some of these other places? Probably not that crazy. The problem is that they were understaffed with law enforcement, and that allowed things to be more crazy and wild and people were bad actors on the law enforcement as well. But
now you mentioned the fact, like, they're selling this idea like this is the worst attack on the U.S. Capitol ever. And people like me and you, obviously, we're old enough to remember when an extremist literally bombed the Capitol. That was back in the 80s. You remember that?
I do not. Which maybe once you dive in.
Shit, let me see, because I remember it very vaguely, but it's something I brought up like very shortly after January 6th happened, and they were selling this narrative that, oh, this is the worst attack ever. No, it's not. There was literally a bombing in the Capitol back in the 80s, and like no one died, but it's still like a bombing is way worse than this faux insurrection here. Let me you pull up something and talk about something, and I'm going to focus on trying to find
up this Breitbart article because I thought it was fake news that law enforcement opened the door and just allowed people in. Remember, they were saying that was misinformation. They were fact checking and all this other stuff. But here it is. Now it's widely. Democrat star, January 6th witness, someone in authority left the door open at the Capitol and mob walked right in. That's why they were standing in between the lines and they were having dance parties and they were having all this exciting things going on inside the Capitol building. Nick Quested, the Democrat star witness for January 6th committee's first primetime public hearing, claimed that someone in authority left the door open at the U.S. Capitol building, and he waved them in, right? Quested is a British filmmaker who followed the Proud Boys in the days leading up to the January 6th, 2021. Quested confirmed reports that the January 6th committee would call him to testify as a witness during the committee's first of 6 primetime televised hearings. However, in a since deleted Instagram post, Quested speculated that someone in authority opened the door for the protesters to come inside in a deliberate act. Quested wrote, "The Proud Boys were organizing together. How many police were there at 11:22 a.m. on the steps of the Capitol? I counted 1. This is a deliberate act. Someone in authority left the door open and the mob walked in. This is the first time I hear fight for Trump. Where does it go now?" Thursday's hearing will not be Quest's first time appearing before the January 6th committee. British filmmaker reportedly spent 7 hours testifying before the committee earlier this year. So, I mean, this is genuine good information. Like, that's what happened. I mean, that's what videos show. It's undoubted that that's what happened. Quest's film crew reportedly obtained footage of meeting between Proud Boys leader Enrique Tarrio, who we caught video of in December, who we talked to on video, and Oath Keepers founder Stuart Rhodes, who I've never had the ability to talk to or cover. The two organizations likely to be at the forefront of the committee's Thursday hearing. And I'm interested. I'm wondering, because Oath Keepers is supposed to be a neutral, like constitutionalist, former vets, former police officers. Just their whole thing is that they won't violate the Constitution. And what's wrong with it? Well,
right.
But
So get this. I found the what I was looking for. It's a Smithsonian article. I just linked it in private chat for you to be able to pull it up and we can go over it. Is out of Smithsonian talking about the bombing in the Capitol in the 80s, and you'll never guess which day it was published. Because I just so happened to notice that January 6th, 2020. So exactly 1 year, and I'm not saying that that's connected or anything. I'm just saying it's an interesting observation. That coincidental. Yeah, very interesting coincidence. That I
remember this. This was now I remember it. It was a female. Wasn't it a feminist or she was a female, and she actually now works for BLM. We looked into this, right?
Yes.
So the person who bombed the the U.S. Capitol building is now a prominent BLM activist, by the way. Historian William Rosenow investigates the May 19th communist organization in a new book about the little-known militant group. And here you can see there's a picture. This is interesting history. Amidst the social and political turmoil in the 1970s, a handful of women, among them one-time Bernard student of Texas sorority sister and daughter to former communist journalists, joined and became leaders of the May 19th communist organization named to honor the shared birthday of civil rights icon Malcolm X and Vietnamese leader Ho Chi Minh M19 took its belief in revolutionary anti-imperialism to violent extremes. It is the first and only woman-created and woman-led terrorist group, says national security expert and historian William Rosenow. M19's status as an incredible outlier from the male-led terrorist organizations prompted Rosenow, an international security fellow at the think tank New America, to excavate the inner workings of the secretive and short-lived militant group. The resulting book, Tonight We Bombed the Capitol, pieces together the unfamiliar story of a group of essentially middle-class, well-educated white people who made a journey essentially from anti-war and civil rights protests to terrorism, he said.
Yeah, and so I just think it's really interesting. You know, they're pushing this idea, oh, it's the worst attack that ever happened in the Capitol. No, it's not. It was literally bombed in the 80s, and no one's really talking about it except for those of us that have the memory of the fact that, hey, this is a thing that happened.
Well, that's probably because she's in BLM. Why would you talk?
I mean, that too.
Let's see what Linda Sue Evans is, an American radical leftist who was convicted in connection to violent, deadly militant activities committed as part of a goal to free African Americans from white oppression. Okay, well, I mean, it sounds like basically what we have with the BLM group. Yeah. But here on her Wikipedia page, basically it breaks down to who she is. Life since prison, along with her partner Eve Goldberg, Evans travels around the United States advocating for lesbian and female inmate rights. Evans is involved in the activist organization, the Center for the Third World Organizing. In March 2002, she helped convene a conference and amongst other things. It looks like they pulled the whole BLM thing from here, which I understand they would. I mean, why wouldn't you? You don't want people to know that.
Right. But also, I'm not sure if I know there is one individual that was a part of that's part of BLM, but I don't remember if it's Linda or not. I think it might have been someone else.
Yep, that might be. Oh, here it is. From 2016 to 2020, became one of America's most influential racial and social change organizations because of his Black Lives Matter Global Network. Susan Rosenberg, who's another individual of interest. Oh, well, you know, we'll have to look more into it, dive deep, but I maybe you're right. It was maybe a different one of the individuals that was involved with this group. So, but yeah, a lot of people don't know that. Like I did. I remember now when we started diving into it, that was kind of what happened. And I wasn't, up front. I wasn't quite sure where we were going with that, but now it makes sense. Democrat star, January 6th witness. We talked about gas prices in the United States, all that wildness coming up more. We have a commercial break. If you guys want to call in, 1-855-472-5483. Give us a holler. Let us know what your thoughts are on the January 6th committee that will take place tonight. Will it be sticky? Will people pay attention? Or is it so overplayed that people are just done with it? I'm not quite sure. We'll get your thoughts on it and more when we come back from commercial break. We're going to dive into some more news. You're listening to the Rundown Live on KGRADB.com, band.video.
Hey members, the new KGRA DB app is now available on iOS and Android devices. Gain on-demand access to any KGRA DB programming. Download any show directly to your mobile device to listen or watch on the go. Go to the App Store and search KGRA DB.
Scrolling all day, time can disappear. Wanna make it count? Why not volunteer?
Posting pics of your food, that takes up time. Time, you've got time to binge all of season 9, though it got so bad.
Time, you got time. We're gonna grow back and be the same browse you had.
Just a few hours to keep families from harm. Help us end home fires with Sound the Alarm.
Volunteer for a day to install free smoke alarms in your community.
Discover the Observation Deck, a one-of-a-kind virtual event platform that takes video conferencing to the next level by using avatars to navigate a campus. There's so many areas and activities to choose from. There's a 1,000-seat auditorium, an expo hall, a nightclub, and even a beach. So come attend a conference, take a class, or hear a lecture on the incredible Observation Deck campus. Go to theobservationdk.com.
You're listening to the KGRA Digital Broadcasting Network. We provide unparalleled coverage of trending news in the world of ufology, cryptozoology, and paranormal phenomenon. Whether you're watching our video live stream or listening to one of our audio programs, you are getting the best from world-renowned researchers and hosts, guiding you through topics the mainstream won't touch. Miss one of your favorite programs? No problem. Head over to the members area at kgradb.com for access to our massive library of award-winning content. Make contact, stay connected, only at kgradb.com.
Tune in to the Rundown Live weekdays on KGRA Radio. Kriston T. Harris, Don Vi Jr. Visit therundownlive.com. Rundown Live, rundownlive.com. I'm your host, Kriston T. Harris, and we're here live covering, basically, we've been talking about the January 6th thing, which has been a big deal. If you guys want to call in, phone number is 1-855-472-5483. We had Will Turbot from Fake Mike Real News holler a little earlier talking about this, but there's a lot of other news we need to cover, and we're going to dive into some of those. Have you guys been feeling it at the pump? Like, the gas pump is a little crazy right now. We're taking it in the gas bowl right now.
Bro, I've been in the midst of trying to replace my truck's fuel pump, and I'm just not looking forward to. Like, I know it needs to be done so that way the whole thing doesn't totally go kaput, but I'm just not looking forward to it.
But like, it's just wild. It's just wild. Gas prices are out of control, and people aren't quite sure because it's happening worldwide. Like, I'd like to say the United States is being targeted, but are they really being targeted? What is going on with the gas crisis? Because right now, I've seen it in Wisconsin yesterday, $5.50 a gallon. Like, that's wild.
Yeah. I mean, we're about to reach $5 here. I know I was talking to my friend Caroline up in Ohio. They just reached $5 for regular there. We're almost at, I mean, it might have topped 5 today. I don't know. But yesterday and the day before, like, we were in the high 490s, so very closely inching to it. My buddy out in California, I mean, dude, don't even get me started about California. And I know all the Californians that are watching are thinking the exact same thing. It's up to $7, $8 a gallon. It's going absolutely insane.
Yeah, here we have it. Now, this story is very interesting. And the reason why we're bringing this up is because I believe that this is going to make way for futuristic technology. Gas prices force U.S. cops to ration calls out media. Surging gas prices around the U.S. are beginning to put a strain on police departments as they try to cut down on fuel consumption. One Michigan police force has already asked its officers to handle whatever calls are acceptable by phone. The American Automobile Association has reported that Michigan has seen one of the highest average weekly gas price surges in the country. Prices were previously climbing weekly, but are now increasing on a daily basis. On Tuesday, the gallon of a regular fuel costed $5.21, up from $5.17. The day before, a week ago, it was $4.70 a gallon. Last year, gas price was $3.01 a gallon, marking an astonishing 73% increase. Gas prices were already putting a strain on U.S. drivers who were increasingly but left stuck on motorways with empty tanks as they tried to test the limits of their fuel gauges, according to the AAA. But now the issue is beginning to severely affect police departments and other agencies. Do you think this means we get drones? Are we going to get like electric drones flying around and it's going to be
In some places, yes, absolutely. Because take Chula Vista, California, for example. I know we covered that on the show several episodes ago, and we covered the article in the Free Thought Project. Chula Vista is essentially their police department has become, or allowed it to become, the first totally drone surveilled city in the United States. The Chula Vista police are utilizing drones for everyday operations, just keeping the public safe and nothing totalitarian or surveillance state related, of course, but it can definitely, I believe, pave the way for a lot more drone usage and robot usage in police departments, because we've seen that attempting to be pushed already, not only in Chula Vista, but during the lockdown, we saw the NYPD and their robot dog from General Dynamics, which, again, I continue to assert that General Dynamics will be the downfall of humanity. But we've seen them try to continue to push this, and I think it might open the door for exactly that. I think you're right.
Well, and technology seems to be the latest in, rage, AI, and everything else. Here it is, and even AI. The law enforcement's going to get these robots. As we know, robot dogs are really big for law enforcement. How long until they just have those patrolling? Roving packs of robot dogs are coming to the moon. They're going to send robot dogs to the moon. Yeah, that's in Yahoo News. I don't know how that came up on my feed, but that's literally right here. I'll throw this up. You can't make this up. Pretty interesting stuff. Roving packs of robot dogs are coming to the moon. It is the year 2035. You'll wake up and press a button that opens up the blinds for your bedroom window, revealing a spectacular view of Earth. It's another morning on the moon as you start your day in one of the human colonies on the lunar surface. As you get out of bed, though you hear it, the familiar whirling sounds of actuators and the tip-tap of feet as your robot dog makes its way towards you. You pet and touch before you two get started on another day of exploring the moon. And, you want to
more so than robot dogs, I'm interested in the fact that they're just kind of casually sort of normalizing the idea of lunar colonization at this point.
Well, that's just it. We're going to be colonizing planets, and they're just making it normal. We're now hearing, did you know that there's a famous restaurant? Have you ever eaten at Chili's?
Maybe once.
Let's say you're sitting at Chili's, and all of a sudden a robot server comes up to you. And that's what we have here. Chili's restaurants using robot servers to make jobs easier for workers.
And also take jobs from other workers.
I mean, they can't find anyone that wants to be a server anymore. They're all doing Lyft and Uber and Grubhub. And as we know,
I don't blame them. And in that aspect, I do get it. Our economy is in the dumpster. The cost of living is gone absolutely insane. Almost no one can afford the cost of almost no one can afford to be alive right now, just because of how expensive everything is getting. So in that aspect, I get it. At the same time, it's like they're both playing hand in hand to put in, and maybe even the controlled collapse of the economy, if we were to really get into it, because it's exactly what we're seeing is a controlled collapse of the economy. And we've known it was coming for decades even. Ron Paul's been warning about it, the Federal Reserve and whatnot. The controlled collapse of the economy is in part probably being used deliberately to push in this new generation of automated workers and robotics and whatnot, because it's like, no one can work and no one wants to work, so let's just move forward with the robots.
Well, robot chefs are here. Here it is, also in the news, skynews.com. Robot chef that has learned to chew, taste, and alter seasoning is unveiled. That's right. Robots can now chew, they can taste, and they can alter the seasoning based on the taste. A robot chef has been trained to taste food at different stages of the chewing process to check if it is salty enough. Researchers at the University of Cambridge developed the bot to imitate the human process of chewing and tasting in order that they might eventually be able to produce food humans will not only enjoy, but can also be tweaked according to individual tastes. If robots learn what does and does not taste good, making them better cooks, they could also be useful in development of automated and semi-automated food preparation. When food is chewed, people notice a change in taste and texture. texture. For example, biting into a fresh tomato at the height of a summer will release juices as it is chewed. Saliva and digestive enzymes are released, changing our perception of the tomato's flavor. The robot, which has already been trained to make omelets, tasted 9 different variations of scrambled eggs and tomatoes at 3 different stages of the chewing process. It then produced taste maps of the different dishes. The researchers found that taste as you go approach improved the robot's ability to quickly, accurately assess the saltiness of the dishes.
That's actually really interesting. I haven't heard of that. That's wild.
You know, chef robots and demonic AI.
It'll be like, you remember Futurama? It'll be like when Bender tried to be a chef.
Futurama, what a great show.
I love that show.
Demonic AI generating its own secret written language that nobody can understand. Daily Star. An image artificial intelligence called Dolly, D-A-L-L-E instead of Wally, it's Dolly, has sparked debate amongst AI experts who claim it is creating a secret language to categorize images that were the words like gibberish that have hidden meaning. So this is, again, we're seeing AI create its own language because it values privacy. Like, we don't value privacy.
I was about to say, isn't this like the second time this has happened, or a third, or something? This is to my memory, this is not the first time that AI has developed its own language.
Why is it that it continuously wants to develop its own language that we don't understand?
I think in part because, you know, as you mentioned, privacy, but it's also, you know, one of the big issues that we've mentioned and that I've mentioned before and has been mentioned previously by individuals like Stephen Hawking and whatnot is the danger of AI becoming so intelligent that it ends up developing its own artificial consciousness or sentience. And that's a problem. That's been warned about. Like, when we get to because we're already subservient to technology. Like, you can observe our world and see that completely. But when we get to the point where the luxuries that we use for our convenience begin to develop their own sentience, their own consciousness, be able to have their own thoughts, and maybe even, you know, predict what humanity can do with its own algorithms. The more it learns, that's going to end up creating a problem to where maybe they think that humanity is obsolete. We shouldn't exist anymore. I mean, yeah, I'm going down a little bit of a rabbit hole now, but I mean, you know, for a very long time, I've warned about an iRobot scenario. For anyone who remembers that movie with Will Smith, 2005, iRobot. If you haven't seen it, check it out. Great film. But you know, when it comes to this sort of stuff, that's a legitimate concern.
Yeah, robots are here. They're going to be here to stay. They say that they're going to be in their homes like everyone has iPods, or iPods, iPhones, and cell phones. But you know, all this stuff like the moon getting 5G, colonizing the moon. You know, it's more realistic, I think, that we colonize the moon before Mars. I don't know why Elon Musk has his sights set on Mars, but you know, not only that, AI has been controversial. It loves to make inexplicably horrible racist posts and troll online. Why is it that AI likes to be a troll? I'm not getting this. This is also in the news, just piggybacking on what we were talking about. But I kind of want to segue away from the technology. I just kind of went down that rabbit hole just a little too quick. But I wanted to talk about something that we haven't talked about in weeks that you were right about. We let you guys know. And that was the Nazi link to the Ukrainian Azov battalion, the Gray Zone, put out an article about what's going on in Ukraine.
Yeah, this is a really great article that I read the other day. I put it out on my page, Break the Matrix. And you know, it's essentially, you know, I warned of this from the very beginning. I know I wasn't the only one. I know Whitney Webb, another fantastic journalist, she warned of this from the very beginning. That much like with Operation Cyclone back in the 1980s, or actually it even started in 1978, where the CIA was funding, arming, and training the Afghani Mujahideen with their asset named Osama bin Laden, for those that didn't know, you know, ended up creating Al-Qaeda and the Taliban, much like Operation Timber Sycamore beginning in the late 2010s, funding the moderate Syrian rebels, which ended up creating the Islamic State, or what the current iteration of the Islamic State, ISIS. I said from the beginning, arming, training, and funding fascist and neo-fascist militants in Ukraine, the same ones that our government installed during the Maidan coup in 2014, is going to have blowback. There's going to be consequences for our government once again propping up extremist organizations to facilitate their imperialist agendas. And now, as this Gray Zone article points out, there are a number of individuals known within the extremist, white supremacist, neo-Nazi communities here in America who are taking advantage of the opportunity to go overseas and fight with and learn from and gain experience from the Azov Battalion and other neo-Nazi elements within Ukraine's military. What do you think is going to happen when these people bring that experience and these new relationships that they create with these individuals, the networking and whatnot, and they bring it back to the United States? It's going to create a threat, a very real security threat for Americans here. And our government is just allowing this to occur.
You're telling me the liberal Biden administration, who has been founded and supported by anti-fascists, are supporting fascists in Ukraine?
Always have, always will be.
And I'm not surprised. So here the article says U.S. agencies have directly and indirectly trained and empowered Nazis, the ultra-nationalists at home, and notice how they call them the ultra-nationalists at home. Or maybe are they? Are Nazis ultra-nationalists? Or are they just social?
Yeah.
They're ultra-nationalists.
Well, I mean, socialism and ultra-nationalism go hand in hand.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. So does communism. I get that.
Mhm.
At home and abroad to fight Russians in Ukraine. This program follows the blueprint established by Western intelligence agencies in Afghanistan and in Syria. So from 1978, which is what you've been talking about, the whole, here, look at this. Zygmunt Brzezinski, the guy behind the Build the Burgers, and also MJ-12, amongst other things. It was part of the president's national security advisor in the 70s, and U.S. intelligence called on its British counterparts to activate networks of Afghan fighters. And that's, like you mentioned, that's where we get the Jahidas and everything else. But the question is will this come back here to blowback? And are we going to have Nazis then on the street that are well-trained performing terrorist attacks? And is that what the whole programming is with the anti-fascism, so that we all become anti-fascists once there is terrorist attacks by these right-wing extremists? Or, I mean, they're so close. Like, it's funny how they call them white-wing extremists, but they're socialists. Like, it's so bizarre to me, because wouldn't they be left-wing extremists?
Well, that's the problem with the whole left-wing, right-wing labeling and dichotomy is that it should really more so be measured on levels of freedom versus authoritarianism. This is the whole right-left labels. That's why they're sort of nonsense. Exactly.
Right. So basically, the CIA has inculcated these fascist Nazis and are using them. And basically, Zelensky, Vladimir Zelensky is running Nazis over there to fight for him. But everyone on the left, they love Ukraine right now, and they're all virtue signaling.
And even on the right, I mean, I've seen so many people that's like, oh, we got to stand with Ukraine. Like it's really this hardcore pro-war messaging that is being used to sweep both sides. I mean, and more so now it's starting to fall off. Like it's the attention span of the American people has really dropped, even less than what it was just like 5 years ago. So it's becoming less of a flavor of the week sort of a thing. So like a lot of people have already moved on to the next big thing, so to speak. But when the pro-war messaging first started, like you saw it across the left and the right. Oh, so we got to stand with Ukraine, much like, just after 9/11, you're either with the terrorists or you're with us. It's just the same pro-war messaging that the military industrial complex always uses.
Here it is. It keeps diving into what we've been talking about. Basically, it says Newsweek encountered similar obstructions in their research. It noted that Azov's political wing, the National Corps, has been connected to the U.S. white supremacist Rise Above movement, Germany's Third Path, Italy's Casa Pound, and other extremist groups. In their efforts to assess the scale of such connections in the United States, Newsweek reporters approached the Department of Justice, FBI, and Department of Homeland Security for comment. Silence was the answer. Newsweek pointed to Cossack House in Kiev as the main Azov recruiting center. Loaned to the Azov battalion by the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, the center's library includes Nazi literature and is described by the Azov National Corps leader Semyaka as a small state within a state. The number of Americans currently there is not known. In addition to white supremacists, members of the acceleration groups, those that want to hasten society's collapse in order to remold it in their own image, are also present in Ukraine. Former Marine Mike Dunn from the Virginia is an informant and once influential figure in the politically fluid Boogaloo Boys. Having commanded its last Sons of Liberty faction, there hasn't been much activity in the Boogaloo movement since I walked away, he said. After being exposed as an informant, Dunn disappeared from the scene only to reappear in February this year, announcing his intention to fight in Ukraine via Poland by signing up to an undisclosed recruiting station. I wouldn't say that I'm necessarily trying to advance the cause of the Boogaloo movement, but I will say that the Boogaloo movement is going to be represented over there. But this makes little sense. Who would follow a Fink to Ukraine, except for mercenaries and fellow feds? Also, didn't Dunn leave the movement? So how could he be representing Ukraine? I have a few there. I have a few that are following me there. I have one going with me there, he says. Henry Huft, a former U.S. Army infantryman and Boogaloo boy from Ohio, was cautioned by the FBI against fighting in Ukraine, but was simultaneously advised by the Bureau to call the U.S. Embassy if he got into trouble. Huft says, I get it. They don't want to be implicated if Russia harms any of us, and they don't want to escalate the conflict by saying that they're sending American soldiers over there. Dunn, the Boogaloo former leader and informant, confirmed that the presence in Washington, D.C. during the January 6th Stop the Steal rally, but claims that he arrived late and did not participate in storming of the Capitol. In the Ukrainian right sectors, Seryo Dubinin, an influential media figure working for the major Ukrainian channel Inter, was also at the Capitol that day, signifying that DHS FBI open door policy included Ukrainian extremists who would network in the U.S., vice versa. Dubinin was photographed with Jake Chansley, the highly decorated U.S. Navy veteran and self-styled QAnon shaman. Dubinin was heard urging the Stop the Steal demonstrators to escalate from peaceful protests to violent. Come on, do it. Ooh, look at that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I actually forgot they included that little snippet about January 6th in this article, so it's very fitting that we're covering this today.
You're saying government informants literally encourage the violence on January 6th. I see, like we mentioned, there's so many aspects, and I love how this ties in as we're going to be finishing up the show. Here's a picture of the QAnon shaman, along with among the tales of intrigue from January 6th is what was Ukrainian Syria and Dibinin, Russian SP, it says Sergei, a member of the neo-Nazi Ukrainian paramilitary, the right sector, doing at the Capitol riot, seen in the happy snap with the Jake the Shaman and Jelly. That what were Ukrainian neo-Nazis doing in America on January 6th?
Exactly. Yeah, this is like we said, there's a lot of moving parts, as I said earlier, multiple facets, multiple moving parts.
I've heard of this, bro. Like that, does that like now that ties into the preeminence of Ukraine? It was like it was planned. It was like the war in Ukraine was planned out on a globalist agenda, and we just got done talking about Bilderberg. How there's very little that happens in the world that Bilderberg is not responsible for, and they admit this in their own writing.
Well, if you remember from the early days of the Ukraine war, when that's all I would talk about on this show, I talked about ad nauseum, fantastic articles, not only from Caitlin Johnstone, but also from years ago from other geopolitical analysts that have specifically pointed out NATO's eastward aggression is deliberately, or not deliberately, directly responsible for creating much of the conflict that ultimately resulted in this current war. So in a way, it was planned out because they knew ahead of time, if you continue with your aggressive expansionism to the east and, flicking the bear, as it were, eventually something's going to pop off. And it did.
Right. And here it says in the Gray Zone article, fascists and Satanists bring their fetish for death to Ukraine. Between 2015 and 2016, several American extremists went to Ukraine to enlist in regular units. Others formed a right sector paramilitary spin-offs with, according to the colleagues, had a fetish for death and torture. Pluto, being the Roman god of hell, their unit was called the Task Force Pluto, named for the Roman god of death, and was led by U.S. Army deserter turned mercenary Craig Lang, who had also worked as a contractor for the Ukrainian military. Lang operated alongside Brian Boyinger, an Iraq war veteran who served as a sniper in Ukraine. Lang recruited Americans for Ukraine, and Boyinger vetted them. Other TFP members included former Marines Quinn Rickard and Sante Pertl. The two compiled video evidence of Lang torturing and murdering a local man, as well as beating and drowning a young female, age unknown, as an Austrian called Benjamin Fischer, nicknamed Bin Laden, allegedly administered adrenaline injections to keep her conscious during the torture. The Department of Justice requested evidence from their Ukrainian counterparts. By 2017, the U.S. military deserter Alex Weishofer had joined Lang via right sector in Ukraine. And this kind of guy dives into the entire history of what's going on. Man, he did a good job of diving into the names, the people are doing, and the dire projections of Ukraine blowback. So U.S. intelligence agencies have allowed an open door policy for veterans, militia, and fascists to travel to Ukraine and its neighbors to kill as many Russian soldiers as possible. The FBI monitors some of the combatants, intervenes in some cases, but typically does nothing. The Homeland Security allows the foreign fighters to travel and return with minimal obstruction. The U.S. charity Volunteers for Ukraine is one of the organizations that provides a veneer of legitimacy for operations that otherwise include extremists. So you're saying the United States is literally harvesting Nazis to go fight in Ukraine?
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was talking about before we brought this article up.
Like crazy.
Yeah, it's exactly what I was talking about right before we started diving into this, is the danger of allowing these domestic fascists to not only go and get real combat experience. Some of them already have it, of course. They're war veterans, they're military veterans, but to get more combat experience fighting along fascists, fighting along these neo-Nazis, and create these networks. It's like having a jihadi extremist, a homegrown jihadi extremist, goes over to Iraq or Syria, and then he makes friends in ISIS. Well, what do you think is going to happen when he comes home? Is now ISIS has an ally, an asset in the homeland. Same here is when you have these fascists go over and you create these friends and these networks, and they make these connections with these deeply entrenched neo-Nazi organizations. And then they come back home. What do you think they're going to do? They're not only going to take that same training that they received and teach their redneck buddies all the stuff that they learned while they were over there in combat, but it also opens a pipeline to where now extremist groups like Azov, Right Sector, National Corps, C-14 will have assets here in the United States. And it plays into, like I said, talking about the war on domestic terror earlier, it opens the door for that to play a part of the war on domestic terror. Because now imagine within the next 5 years or so, 4 or 5 years, something like that, we start to see these neo-fascists or whatever, these people who's facilitated by this conflict in Ukraine, this federal open door policy, see them commit an act of terror here in the United States. Well, that gives more fodder to the war on domestic terror that the Biden administration has already been attempting to prop up and facilitate the narrative of, just like we've been talking about all day. Everything connects together, brother.
And it didn't start with the Biden administration. This has been going on for years and years. We're just saying that they're currently allowing it and not doing anything to prevent it. And for all those anti-fascists out there that are like, oh, stop fascism, well, you're supporting it with this administration. And it's funny, we haven't heard a peep from any of the anti-fascists really since January 6th, which is a coincidence, And tonight maybe I'll go live. Maybe we'll go live. I don't know. I might go live and cover this trial and do a commentary on it. while
Unfortunately, I won't be able to. I actually have plans later tonight.
No, that's fine. You do your plans. And tomorrow we'll be back. Same bat time, same bat channel. Thank you to everyone over at kgradb.com. Make sure you visit kgradb.com as well as band.video and therundownlive.com. Will Turbot was our guest today from Fake Mike Real News. You can support him by looking up Fake Mike Real News and Will Turbot. What a wonderful individual. He is also there January 6th covering events as a reporter like me. And if you guys have any questions, show tips at therundownlive.com. You can support us. We have t-shirts for sale on therundownlive.com. We need your support, 100% listener funded. Thank you guys. You guys know we do hard work. We put our life at risk sometimes covering these events, and we don't all have to agree, but it's important we investigate all narratives, all viewpoints, left, right, top, down, bottom, centric, interspace, interdimensional, whatever.
Intergalactic.
Right. Deep gravitons and little mini black holes and weightlessness. I don't know. We'll investigate it all. We're willing to talk to a lot of people. And, as we experience different things, as we get more data, just keep in mind our experiences are our own. That doesn't mean it's the entire picture. And we will find out more tonight. We'll take some calls tomorrow maybe and hear more from you guys on your opinions on what happened tonight at the hearings. Stay blessed. You guys have a good one. You're listening to therundownlive.com.